G'day, today we are talking about steel trays, and particularly we're talking about used steel trays. So if you're in the market, if you've bought a dual cab, new or used, comes with a tub, or maybe you've bought a cab chassis, which is increasingly, even Toyota now will do cab chassis across pretty much all of their range to allow you to save some money by not getting the tub, because tubs, when they're at least in the current model, they're generally not worth a whole lot. Anyway, you want to go to a steel tray. One option that you may have is, rather than going and getting one built, a new one, is you might be able to pick up a used one like I have here. So this is a used steel tray, and we're going to talk about a few things that you want to think about if you are looking to get a steel tray, and what are your options if you get a used one. So this one, some different things that that make this relatively easy to do is most single cab, dual cab, space cab utility vehicles in Australia, not talking like Rams and F trucks and stuff, Hilux, D-Max, Ranger, they're pretty much all run plus or minus the same sort of tray. So that means for a dual cab, you're running a 1.8 by 1.8 square. So this is a dual cab tray. This is going to go on our Project 6-seater Hilux. This tray is 1.8 by 1.8. A space cab tray is generally 2.1 long and 1.8 wide, and a single cab is usually 2.4 by 1.8. There are some exceptions. We've bought a single cab tray that we're doing up at the moment, and it's a little bit oversized. It's 1.9 wide and 2.5 long, so that's unusual. There is a little bit of play. You might find one that's like 1.85 wide, or for a single cab might be 2.45 or something. Americs are a little different. Americs generally have a 2 metre wide tray. They're not all 2 metres wide, but a lot of them are. Because Americs are a little bit wider, so Americs are a bit of an exception. And the old patrols, like old GU patrols and stuff, they have different size trays. But generally, most trays are about the same size, which makes it relatively easy to swap them around. So this tray here is actually off the current generation Hilux, and we're going to put it on an N70, so the previous generation Hilux, and we've just been mucking around with the mounts. We've got the mounts right. The mounts are pretty easy to do, either N70 to the current generation in the 80, or going from the current generation, the 80 back to the 70. Pretty simple, not too much difficulty there. Most of the holes line up. There's only two that you've got to slightly move. But with, if you want to go from a Ranger tray to a D-Max tray, you're probably going to have to move the mounts. So if you're a very competent welder, you might want to do that yourself. If you're not a competent welder and you're going to get a cocky crap weld that you wouldn't even want to stand on, let alone put any weight on, you probably want to do that professionally. But you can move the mounts. It's not very difficult, even for a welder to do. It's not very difficult to move the mounts, and you can pretty much buy any tray you want and put it on, any other tray. So any dual cab tray will pretty much fit on any other dual cab, noting some exceptions for stuff like the Americ or a patrol tray, for example. But most of them, they're standard sizing, and it's just altering the mounts, and you'll get it to fit. There's a lot of, the big reason that you would do this is to save money. So this tray here cost us $1,000. The appeal of this tray was the fabricated toolboxes, the under tray toolboxes that it has. So you can find any number of steel trays that have under tray toolboxes, but a lot of them will just have the generic under tray toolbox that they've bought from eBay or from Total Tools or whatever their particular tool retailer is. It might be a King Chrome brand, or it might be some brand you've never heard of, and they just mount under the tray as a generic toolbox. They're generally a little lighter, not always, but they're generally a little lighter. This is a very solid fabricated toolbox, and if you find the one with a fabricated toolbox that has been clearly made by the tray builder, that will generally put the price up. So trays with under tray toolboxes are generally worth more, because it's nothing for a tray builder to charge you $600 per toolbox or more for a toolbox. So if you've got two toolboxes under it, or in a single cab you might have four, 6, 12, 18, 24, there might be $2,500 worth of toolboxes on it. You might find this one doesn't have a trundle tray. We're going to put a trundle tray under it, and they're quite useful. You can have tie-down points in the tray. You know, the swivel lift up tie-down points in the tray. This one doesn't have that, but I really like those. So we are actually going to fit 4 of those flush mounted into the tray before we paint this and fit it. Other things that might have the size of the headboard, you might have a 4-inch pipe headboard or a 3-inch pipe headboard. The bigger the headboard, the more expensive that will be. People look for that. Fuel tanks or water tanks under the tray or in the headboard, those will add more value. Tipper trays with hydraulic power packs and rams, that will cost you more. So drop sides, this has drop sides, they're not on it at the moment. We're prepping them for paint at the moment. So they will cost you more. Sometimes they're missing, sometimes they're bent. So, but if they're all intact like this one was, that will cost you a little bit more. Tail lights, it's not hard to spend hundreds of dollars on fancy LED tail lights nowadays, or you might have genuine tail lights, which we'll talk about a little bit later. They're all things that can add for value, and then there can be little things like whether you get the fuel filler, whether you can put that on it. So lots of different things. The best way to do it is if you know the kind of tray you want. Like I look for trays quite regularly to see if a good one comes up. Just when I have a second. You want to know what they're worth because you can overpay with these things as with anything, but it's nothing, for a really, really fancy, very customized, you can customize any number of things on these things. So let's say it's got fuel tank headboard, it's got a trundle tray, it's got under tray toolboxes, it's got some stenciling on the headboard, it's got a 3-inch headboard, it's got a fuel tank in that headboard, good set of drop sides, custom mud guards. That thing, if you got it at a really, really high-end tray builder, because there are really high-end tray builders and then there's people that don't really focus on that market, it's nothing to spend $10,000 on a tray nowadays. You can do that in a flipping heartbeat, and that's before you even get to toolboxes and canopies and builders racks and all the sorts of stuff you can put on the tray as well. You can just get into thousands. So you really want to know what that's worth. So if you find one for sale, it's worth quoting a tray builder, get an idea of what it would cost for you to get the tray that you want built, and then have a look around and see what you can find. So good places to find it, speak to wreckers, ring around wreckers and see what you can find. Occasionally you might see one come up on Facebook Marketplace. This is where this came from. A fellow wanted to go from a tray to a tub. He bought a used Hilux, wanted to go from a tray to a tub, so we bought this off him as he put his tub on. So, and I knew what this tray would have been worth for either us to build or to get built for ourselves. So at $1,000, I was quite happy to pay the money. I've seen a lot of trays come up for sale that I go, geez, that's about an $8,000 tray. The tray we've just bought, the single cab tray that we're renovating over in the other workshop. That's about an $8,000 tray, and we got it for $300 because it was missing the tailboard and had a slight impact on the back corner, which was no big deal. We straightened all that out. That was quite simple, and then we ended up buying got the factory to actually build us a new tailboard, so it all matched as if it was all straight out of the factory, and that's a circa $8,000 tray that we've got. We're at the moment we're about, including freight, I think we're about $1,500 into it. So, that's a good buy, and a very, very, very good solid tray that we'll put on something in the near future. So, yeah, so that's really saving money is where this is really worth considering. To do it the easiest possible way, you really want to buy a tray that's off the vehicle that you have. So if you've got an RC Colorado, to go back in the vault a little bit, find a used tray off an RC Colorado at a wrecker. Well, assuming it's not bent or anything and it's all in good shape, pick it up off that, drop it on yours, nice and simple. That'll make it really, really simple. If you've got to move mounts, that's going to take time, and you want to. If you can't do the welding yourself because you're not confident in that, and you don't think you can, because these things carry a lot of weight, you don't want to muck around with that unless you're absolutely sure you're up to the job of doing it, and you'll know. Leave it for a professional to do it. So you've got to, if you're going to get that altered, You need to factor that cost in. Is it still going to be cost effective with getting someone else to do that work for me? Yes or no, that should be a pretty quick decision. And then fitting, can I fit it myself? They're not hard to fit, but you need some lifting tools and stuff. Like we've got forklifts and things here, so it's not a problem for us to do it, but that's not everybody. You know, and back in the day, I've lifted whole cabins off vehicles just off a I've got a very strong steel frame shed, and using ratchet straps and lifting the body off the ute, and then pushing the chassis rails out, and then doing whatever I need to do and putting the body back down again. So there's lots of different ways you want to do it, but these things are heavy, things can go wrong. You don't want to, you want to be very careful. You want to be assured that you can do it. It's not worth putting your life at risk just to save a few dollars. But tray fitting, if you go to a tray builder, they will almost certainly tell you the cost to build the tray, and then they'll have a separate line item for removing your old tub and fitting the new tray, because it does take a while. It takes a little bit of time to get the old one off, to do it carefully, not to bash anything or scratch anything, put the new one up and wire it all in. So while we're on wiring, one thing that's worth noting, so this tray here, not every manufacturer, but some manufacturers will sell factory tail lights. So for example, this is off a Hilux, and these are genuine Toyota tail lights. They sell them for a steel tray or an aluminium tray, and these are factory Toyota. They've got Toyota branding on them, and the good thing is not the branding or the fact that I've got a Toyota and I've got Toyota tail lights. Who cares? It's that they've got a factory tail light plug. So this tail light plug is the same as the tail lights on my Hilux. So just click them in, I'm all good to go. Very, very simple. The single cab tray that we've got over there, it's off an RG Colorado. And that Colorado, again, it has GM tail lights, and the GM tail lights have the plug to just click straight into the RG Colorado tail lights. And that tray has a mounting point for it for a reversing camera, and on the tray it has an RG Colorado reversing camera mounted with the RG Colorado factory plug. So if you bought that tray, you just take your loom out of your tub, click in your tail light connector, your reversing camera, your number plate light, away you go. Really simple. So if somebody's done that for you, if you buy a tray and it is off your exact ute, and you do have the option of having on that the tail lights, reversing camera, number plate light for that vehicle, and they're a genuine part, hopefully you can just plug them in. It's not a big deal to wire the lights in. You've just got to do that. If you know anything about auto electrics, you can probably do it yourself. It's not super complicated with a wiring diagram, or you'll have to take it to an auto electrician to get them to do it for you. Either way, yeah, that's something that you're going to have to do. But if it's got the factory plugs, that's just going to make it that little bit easier for you, which is why this tray has that. This tray's just got the Toyota on it, because whoever built the tray obviously wanted to make it as simple as possible. Just click the plugs in, away we go, and that's nice and simple. There's lots of fancy LED tail lights you can get. You can pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for LED tail lights, or you can get the eBay specials for 20 bucks or 30 bucks. You do get what you pay for a little bit, particularly regarding moisture ingress. I find that, even some of the old steel trays I've had, they're old Narva lights, they're kind of a bit of a standard for these parts. It seemed that all the tray builders back in the day used to use the standard Narva tail lights for their steel trays, and they had good seals on them. They didn't leak water, very reliable. You could rely on them for years and years and years at a time, and you'd never have a problem. If you parked it outside, the worst thing is that the tail lights wouldn't be as glossy, they'd start to dull. And if they dulled too much, then the light would struggle to shine through, and you had to upgrade your tail lights when you went and got your annual roadworthy. But some of the new LED tail lights, they'll say, oh, we're IP67 rated, or we're IP68 rated. And yeah, okay, sure, in principle you are, but it doesn't take long before you find water ingress and the tail lights don't work anymore. So you do get what you pay for to a degree. So just factor that into your purchase decisions, and the fact that you've got to wire them in. So if you get an LED tail light, they will be colour coded, but when you pull your loom out of your truck and go to wire it in, you are going to have to, you are going to have to splice those wires in to get all that working. So, but again, it's not a big deal, but it is something you want to keep in mind. Do you want toolboxes? You know, if it comes with toolboxes, that job's done for you. If not, then you just have to measure, the distance between your mud guards and the back of the tray, see your departure angles and stuff. This tray here has got a tapered rear toolbox, which is, sometimes they're just hard square, they go down and they've just got a square end. And if you put them too far back on your vehicle, if you're doing forward driving, that might impact your departure angles a little bit. You might want to think about that. Trundle trays, water tanks, whatever else you need. You might, they're all good things to have. Not hard to add. All that stuff you can buy off the shelf and just fit it. It's really not that complicated. You can modify things like we're going to do for extra tie down points. This has obviously got a rope rail. You can't see it from where you are, where the camera is, but this has got rope rails down either side. I would have, this has got a gap in the middle, which is where we're going to put our trundle tray, and we'll have to redo our number plate mount and light. Other tie down points where you want, he's got a couple of additional tie down points welded to the headboard, which we will leave because that won't be unhelpful. But does it have enough tie down points? Just things you want to keep in mind. Fuel filler. So this has got the fella who sold it to me. This is a genuine Toyota fuel filler. Not the biggest deal in the world, but again, it does make it easier for mounting because there's a factory hole where that sits, and then you can just disconnect your fuel filler off your tub, put it on that. It does make it a little bit easier. If you don't have that at all, if you don't have a fuel filler, you're going to have to get one because the fuel filler off your tub won't be sufficient. You're going to need to get a fuel filler of some description. So if you don't get that with the tray, you'll need to get that as an extra. So yeah, and then colour, I suppose. If you are you going to paint it? Are you going to is it factory match? This is grey, the moment, or silver, I suppose you'd say, and it's going on a white Hilux. Silver tray on a white Hilux, not really the end of the world, but we are actually going to paint it. And the reason that we're going to paint it is because we're going to give this bed lining product Raptor a go and see how that goes. I've used other bed lining products before and deadening products before. I haven't used Raptor, so we're going to do that out of sheer more curiosity and see how that goes and see how that holds up on a steel tray. So we'll be painting that. But if you've got to colour code your tray because it doesn't match, then that's an additional cost as well. So again, if you've got to move the mounts and get someone to do it, if you've got to get someone to fit it, you've got to paint it, you add all those costs together. If you're still getting a sizable discount in the thousands of dollars, it might still be worth doing it. Or you add all that together and you go, geez, I could just buy a new tray and get it fitted by the tray builder for the same price. These are all things that you've got to factor in before you launch into buying a used steel tray. But as I said, like if you can get one for $1,000 like this, and this tray here would cost me 5 times that to get that built locally, and we'll have it all on by for $2,000 even with the modifications that we're going to make, because I'll do it in my spare time, so that's not going to cost me anything per se. It's going to save me thousands of dollars, so it is all worthwhile. Things you want to think about, things to be careful of. When you go to buy one of these things, then you're pretty much going to be looking at wreckers. You might find someone who's bought one, bought a ute with a steel tray, they really want a tub, but that was what was available to them, or they had a steel tray, they don't like it, they want to go back to the tub. You might find one of those, in which case you can go see it on the ute, you can see it's got no damage, easy, nice and simple. But the reality is, where would you track one of these down? Ring around your local wreckers, prominent wreckers nearby you, and see what they've got. 4-wheel drive specialists, commercial specialists. Speak to them and see what they've got. A lot of those guys now, I know a few of them, that will offer a fitting service, so that if you say, I want that tray, they'll give you a quote for removing it and then putting it on your ute. That will cut through a lot of mucking around for you. If it's colour coded, it will fit. Nice and simple, not a really complicated job for them, and saves you some time as well. But if you're going to a wrecker, You know, occasionally you might find a wrecker that's got a tray off a ute that's blown the engine and it wasn't worth repairing. You know, a ute that's just clapped right out. You might find a real. I just found this the other day. A fellow had a late 90s Ford Courier 4x4 space cab, beautiful tray. I missed it. I didn't get in quick enough. It had a fuel tank headboard. It had builder's racks. It had a canvas cover, drop sides, under tray toolboxes, trundle tray, tie down points in the tray. It's quite an old ute. I mean, that's 25 years old, but the tray was magnificent, and he was selling it for like, you know, $800 or something. I just didn't get in there in time, and it sold rather quickly. But that was a bargain. But the ute was just worn out. The ute was worn out, and he was parting it out. So occasionally you can find that, or even and a Courier has no semblance to anything that's on the market today, but it was 2100 long, 1800 wide, adjusting the mounts, fitted to a current generation ute, no problem. Absolutely no problem at all. And it was immaculate. It was white, paint looked good, doesn't look like it had done much work, but anyway, the point is sometimes you might get a tray off a ute at a wrecker off an older ute, but the dimensions are right, and just move the mounts and you're good to go. But usually vehicles that you're buying at a wrecker have been in an impact. And this is where you do need to be careful with steel trays, because they can bend. And you know, chassis rails bend, the tray will bend with it. And you know, you might have a look on a photo, a wrecker sends you a photo, or you have a look at it sitting on a stack of drums, and you go, oh yeah, the tray looks okay. Then you get it to fit on your ute, and you've got a 2-inch gap from where your holes have got to go in, because it's got a big whoop in it, and you didn't quite see it. So you do need to be careful there. Hopefully it's had a front end impact or something where the chassis rails at the back have not been affected. It's absolutely dead square. Ideally what you would want to do is you'd want to see it on the vehicle. You know, have a look at what's the vehicle that it came off. Big back end impact. There's probably going to be a bend somewhere. It doesn't mean that it's insurmountable, but number one, you'd be getting a discount for it for the risk that you're taking, and the additional work that almost certainly is going to be in there and fitting it to your vehicle if it's had an impact. You know, you need to see it. You need to have a look at it. You know, chuck a square over it, ruler, check that it's square, or if they're going to fit it, then that's their problem. But you don't want a wonky tray. You know, see if it's had a front end impact, but the doors look okay, the cabin looks alright, it's just stoved in the front. You know, check the panel gap between when tray builders, a decent tray builder, when they're building a tray and when they mount it, they'll try and be square, even distance between the back of the cabin and where the steel tray begins. So you can check all that. You know, do the drop sides fold down and latch easily? That's worth thinking about. You know, you can see that, or drop sides are missing. That's quite frequent with a wrecker. If you want the drop sides, so for example, on this single cap steel tray we've just bought, it was missing the tailboard, had everything else with it, just missing the tailboard. So somewhere, you know, between the accident and us buying it, the tailboard's gone astray, and we didn't get it. So we wanted to buy it. We actually bought a new one. We could have fabricated one. We just got the original tray, looked up the original tray builder and got them to manufacture a tailboard for us. That cost us $650 just for the tailboard. And this was for a ute tray that cost us $300. So that was quite a bit of money that we weren't expecting to, you know, necessarily spend. Because we got the ute tray so cheap, that is what we did. But if you were missing all three sides, you can probably multiply, it'd be safe to multiply that $650 by 3, and that would get you to, you know, nearly $2,000, and off a $300 ute tray, all of a sudden you've blown your budget right out. So, or if the drop sides have been injured in the impact to the point where they're bent beyond all recognition, you might be able to use them. So you do want to see it, ideally see it on the vehicle before you go too far. Other things in closing that you might want to think about is just your mounting system for your drop sides. So you have adjustable tensioning latches, which are fairly standard, or then you've got the old turn handles, which are off really old ute trays, and then in between you had these things that fold up and push down. You can also find a metal rod system which is similar to this, where you just turn. That's mainly on bolt together trays. Bolt together trays are the cheapest type of tray that you can find, and should be. They're cheap, they're rattly. I don't like bolt together trays, but they are the kind of bargain basement both for new and used trays. Bolt together trays are always worth less as opposed to welded. Welded, not as many rattles, and a bit more solid. These mounts here, I'm not a fan of these. I'd much rather the adjustable tension buckles. I can't. The word escapes me at the minute. I used it a minute ago. On your drop sides, that's what your mounts. Those adjustable mounts, I think they're far better. These aren't bad. The fact they've got a pole, because with the pole mount, it does mean that you can put your sides on and leave your tailboard off, and it'll sit. But that type of mount and your twist, I find they rattle a little bit more. The ones that are adjustable, you can put more tension on them to hold them in, because there's nothing worse if you're driving along on a long trip and your tray's rattling the whole time. Particularly with those bolt together trays, it can just become unbearable at a point. So there's some things you want to think about. Keep watching the channel, because we're going to be moving through painting this up and fitting it to the ute. So if you're looking at what some things that you might want to be doing in renovating a ute tray and getting it onto your particular ute, keep watching, because we'll be following that through in the next few weeks. In the meantime, hope this is helpful for you if you're looking to put a used steel tray ute on your dual cab. Thanks for watching.